Hello and welcome to another episode of Athletics for Life podcast. We're your hosts, Jeffrey Copes and CD Johnson. And Athletics for Life is a podcast where we explore the lessons learned through sports and we work to improve our programs. We interview a variety of people, a lot of athletic directors, a lot of interesting people in the world of sports. And as our interview is today, we interview alumni from our schools. So Jeff, our alumni today comes from ISU. So would you please introduce her?
Yeah, thanks, CD. Welcome to a new episode. It's always great to talk to alumni. The last one was 4 months ago for us. So today we have Misheel Enkhbayar on our podcast. Some of you who are our followers, they've seen Namun early on in the first season of Athletics for Life. That's her older sister. Now we have Misheel back, Misheel on the ISU on our podcast. Former alumni of ISU, she graduated in 2019, and she played all of the core sports. Was involved in production, student council, and doing the IBDP program. So a very versatile young lady. I had the pleasure to work with her as the AD, but also as a coach for soccer. And we're very happy that she's able to talk to us today, to share her story, and to share how she's doing and give us some tips and tricks and talk about the lessons learned through sports. So by further ado, we go into Misheel and enjoy the podcast.
Enjoy.
How are you, Misheel? Good?
I'm doing good, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. It's evening for you now, right?
Yes, it's 5 p.m.
5 p.m. Okay. It's nice and fresh outside here in UB, so up
Yeah.
early.
School started.
School started, exactly. Hey, Misheel, we want to welcome you on our podcast. It's great to have you here. We'd love to talk to alumni. I was just checking, the last alumni we had was 4 months ago, CD. John T. Morris, seems like a lifetime ago. John T. Morris from Australia, so that was awesome. Misheel, we had your sister on the podcast a long time ago, last year. That was awesome. So can you just tell us who you are, where you're at, where you're from, just a little bit about yourself.
My name is Misheel. I graduated ISU class of 2019, and I'm currently going into my third year at the UBC Sauder School of Business in Vancouver, Canada.
2 years ago already, yeah?
I know. It's insane.
So you played sports at ISU, obviously. That's why you're on the podcast. Can you talk a little bit about what you remember from your time at ISU and playing sport, and what were you involved in there?
So I was lucky enough to be able to play all three: volleyball, basketball, and football or soccer. And I was even captain for some. But I think the most memorable moments of my entire athletics life at ISU was definitely the practices. Just being able to play the sport with my friends and the girls who also enjoyed the same sport. I think that was it was very fun, and that was very memorable.
And Misheel, you were lucky to play all three. And you traveled to how many events?
I'm gonna say around 10, but I don't know.
I got the number somewhere. You traveled to a lot of events.
I did.
I do have in China, which the last time we traveled was in January of 2019.
2019.
So what was the most memorable about these travels overseas to China?
Although the sport was the main thing, I think the most memorable thing actually was just the nights at the hotels and the pre-shopping, because we always got there a day earlier because we were traveling from further. And I think those were the most memorable, and what I like when I think of ACAMIS, I think of that rather than actually playing the sport. But one particular moment that stands out was my very first ACAMIS, and I think you were hosting as well at Udaloy for football.
Yes.
And ISU, both girls and boys team both found out that we got into the finals. And there's this picture of everyone standing there with the number one, thinking that we were all going to get first. But I think both teams ended up with second, but I don't remember it. Yeah, that moment really stands out to me.
Yeah, that's been about 5, 6 years ago already.
Yeah, that was when I
It
was
was
in, I think,
2015.
yeah, 7th or 8th grade.
Yeah, and I remember that we had a pool party there. We had a beautiful pool over there, and
Mm-hmm.
we had the banquet and the award ceremony at the pool, and then everybody went into the pool, and the pool was down a meter when the party was
Yeah,
over.
I
That was
think
wonderful.
Wow.
I think we actually started that because we decided to throw our captains in. And so we
Mm.
threw in our two, like the boys and girls captains.
Well, coming from Mongolia, it was very hot over there, so you deserve to go in that
Yeah,
pool.
for sure.
What's crazy is to hear that Mr. Copes was working at another school when you first met him.
Yeah.
How was it when he came in? And did you notice that anything changed at ISU, or how was it was Mr. Copes ever your coach in any of the sports?
Yeah, Mr. Copes coached me for football 1 year and basketball 1 year.
Yeah, I think we did that together with Mr.
Yeah,
Dole, and
yeah, I
yeah,
think even, yeah. But yeah, I remember when Mr. Copes, because I think it was grade 10 when ISU hosted basketball, and you, Lloyd, came, and you, Lloyd, for some reason, never came to ACAMIS either. I felt like, I think I saw them maybe twice, and it was when we went there, they came to Mongolia. And that was the first time we saw Mr. Copes. And everyone just remembered him as Big Tim's guy, because he would always wear brown Timberlands. Yeah.
very weak ankles. Yes, I have to.
Yeah, and then the next year there he was at ISU as the new athletics director, and we also something clicked, and we were like, okay,
Yeah.
now when Lloyd finally came.
Yeah, and that's funny story because I'm good friends with your AD back then, Mr. Dole, and he coached you in many different sports, and
Yeah.
you guys were actually the reason I signed on for ISU, because the way you acted, the way you behaved, the way you presented yourself as a school. I think that's very important as a school to present yourself well when you travel overseas. So yeah, I remember coming in here and I had to keep it quiet. I couldn't tell anyone, and it was funny because Mr. Dole knew of course, and Miss Hanselman, remember, she knew, and it was so difficult. But yeah, but we came over here in shorts in February, which I learned that wasn't a good idea back then.
So now that you've kind of grown off and moved away, do you feel like sports has helped you with moving halfway around the world and the new challenges that brings? Do you think that sports in some way helped prepare you for where you're at now?
I think for me, being a part of ISU Athletics, I think it helped me in ways that the general IB program was also supposed to help with, but because so much of what I did in the IB was sports, like things such as time management, leadership, communication, those things I think were the biggest lessons I learned from being in athletics at ISU, just because going into all three sports throughout the year and all three of them being team sports, they bring more valuable lessons to you than you would think.
Sure.
And Michelle, you did a lot of other things too. You were in the production, you were student council, you did so many things here. How did you balance all that? Because the IB, the DP program, is very tough in general. How did you balance all of that while you were here with the sports and practicing early mornings? Remember? So how did you balance that?
To be honest, I really don't know. I think at one point I might have gone crazy because there was times where I would come in at 6 a.m. for basketball practice, do school, and then stay till 6 p.m. for the play practice, the production. And then I think I'd also stay till 8 p.m. for university applications as well, because that was when all the IAs and university applications were due. But yeah, I think what helped was that I didn't consider sports and all the extracurricular activities as things I needed to do for school, but to me, they were things that I was genuinely interested in and things I genuinely liked doing. And so it wasn't as exhausting knowing that, oh, I have to do this, I have to get through it. But it was more of a stress reliever for me.
Definitely. And how do you compare that to now, Misheel? Because now you're in university, studying business, right?
Yeah.
How do you compare all of that now to the university? Is it easier to do there? Did it help you doing all these things here at ISU to being in university right now?
I think definitely. I think with everything that I had going on in high school, my time management skills they got a lot better. And so here I'm more used to having taking on a huge workload for myself and being able to manage it better as well. Throughout the last year or my second year while I was in Mongolia during COVID and school was online, I was also working and things like that. When you genuinely enjoy something, you don't see it doesn't seem to be as exhausting as you would think, even though you're out all day doing so many things, it's not as exhausting because you enjoy it.
Sure, that's good to hear because for Mr. Copes and I, it's very common to have students who are involved in, everything. They want to just be a part of everything. And we worry about those kids because while we appreciate them being on our teams, we worry that, is it too much? Are they stretching themselves too thin? But I think, like you said, as long as it's something that you do enjoy, you figure out how to manage your time, right?
For sure.
Misheel, if I ask some of your previous coaches, how would you describe Misheel? What do you think they would say?
Oh God. I don't know. I think the coach I had the most was definitely Mr. Dole. I think I had him for 2 seasons of volleyball. 2 or 3 seasons of volleyball. I think 2 or 3 seasons, two seasons of basketball. And so I'm just thinking about what Mr. Dole would say.
Well, that's a difficult one because you never know what he will say.
I know.
But you won a few awards, Misheel, for a specific area. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I won quite a few for Coaches Award. And I think a lot of it had to do with, personally, I would like to think that it was because I was very dedicated to the sport and to the team as a whole. I will 100% say that there were so many better athletes than me in the teams, but I think because I really just enjoyed playing, that I would always be there early at practice. I would help out any teammates who wanted help. And I think that was the main thing that got me all the awards.
Yeah, and it's not so much the awards, right? We always talk about that. That's all a second hand, but I think you deserve that in a way that, and this is what Mr. Dole would say for sure. I know that. He's like, if you go on a trip, the first person on the list is Misheel, because then we have an extra staff member over there. And that's how we saw you sometimes. Like, Misheel, go over there, arrange that. And Misheel, can you do this? And I think that's so important to have those kind of skills. Can you compare the first time you went, because was the soccer your first trip?
That was, yeah.
That was your first trip to your last trip, which was the basketball one in Macau. Am I correct, right? That was your last trip. How did you grow through those trips in those leadership skills, management skills? Can you talk about that?
Whether it be because I was getting older or because I just got familiar with the trips, I think my first year I was definitely just I get to go on a trip with my friends and we get to play something. But senior year, it was, I think, more about rather than winning, I just want everyone in my team to enjoy the trip like it's their first time, like it was for me. And I remember there was one time where everyone was just laughing, and I think I was standing with you and Mr. Dole, and I looked over and everyone, it was like all the little ninth graders just laughing and being like, all right, I think we're good. Yeah.
Did you feel like did that give you a lot more pressure as an upperclassman? Because I find that some athletes, they tend to, when they're an underclassman, they can just go and play, like you said. But then when you're an older classman, you kind of have this sense of responsibility for everybody else, making sure no one's getting into trouble. They're having a good time. They're ready to play. Did you feel that as you were, in your senior years and traveling?
I don't think I felt pressure or responsibility to be like taking care of everyone else, but I think the pressure came from moving on to a new division and knowing that that division was just like 10 times harder. We definitely didn't expect the competition. I think that was where the pressure came from, but not necessarily from being, oh, I have to be responsible as a senior student.
That's a great bridge because I was already trying to go to that direction. So we were always in the blue division in ACAMIS. For those people who don't know, ACAMIS is the Association of China and Mongolia International Schools. And there's about 120, 30 schools now involved, and they have 7, 8 divisions and schools from Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, and Mongolia and China. So it's a big thing. And we were in the blue, the smaller division. And I remember 2017, 18, I think Mr. Dole and I were discussing like we should move on. And I know Mrs. Cede, you were in with the American school in the same division, and they were like, "Well, these schools are very big," and Mr. Dole like, "Just go for it." So Misheel, you made that bridge already, but how was that? Because the blue division was always, like you said, first place, bronze place, whatever. We were always there. To move, remember that first tournament you played in Shanghai? How was that transition for you and for the teams?
It was just so unexpected. I remember hearing that we moved up a division after we came back from football in blue division, and remember hearing that like next year we're going on to orange and these schools are bigger. But when I thought that overall ACAMIS, all the schools combined, was just like everyone was at a similar level. But these are schools that are so much bigger, and because they're so much bigger, people take their pick. It's not like because ISU and ASU are just such small schools, everyone tries to get involved in everything. But these schools are everyone takes their pick at a sport and develops it constantly. And you can tell that they are dedicated to that one sport. And they definitely did have kids that played all 3 sports, but their training and the time that they've taken, you could tell it was a lot more than what we had done. And it showed through the results too.
Yeah, I think of even like Dulwich, who is sometimes in the blue division, and we went to a tournament at Dulwich, and just their campus with, 8 soccer pitches and I think 2 pools. It's just mind blowing for what they had as far as facility even for their athletes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we're trying to manage 1 football pitch and get everyone ample practice time. It's a whole different world, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but Misheel, you say the results, but in general, I think if I ask Mr. Dole too and the coaches, like we always did fine, even in the orange division. The results might not always show it, but we still did okay. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the preparation and the ISU Athletics program? How did that prepare you guys for those trips? Not only the playing, but also the other part of that. How to behave, how to be, all that stuff, all those skills.
Yeah, for sure. Because ISU, Mongolia and ISU and ASU, us being the only schools that travel overseas and into international borders, I think ISU and ASU does emphasize a lot more on responsibility. And secondly, that we're representing an entire country. From the 100 schools that participate in ACAMIS, two of us are from Mongolia. And I remember in Mongolia, ISU and ASU, it's always rivalry. But when we get there, and in Blue Division especially, it was always support for the same country. And I think that even though we had training and we emphasized the sports, there was also equal emphasis on you have to represent your country and you have to be responsible for that as well. And I think that's why, as Mr. Kopp said before, I think that's ISU showed a lot of, that's one of the reasons that I'm so proud to be a part of ISU.
Yeah, that's great, because that's what we want. Yeah. From a small country going down. And I felt, especially when we went to the Orange Division the first time in Shanghai, like normally we would travel with ASU or they were on different flights, but you come, you have some people that right? Now we're just all alone, these people from Mongolia coming down, and they had no expectation of us. They're like, are these Mongolians coming down to China? Who are they?
Yeah.
So yeah, those results are second. I think that those events that we played, and they all told us that you guys represented so well because they had no idea. I think that's super important. So that was really good.
I'm curious to kind of look back even further. Did you always know that you wanted to be involved in sports? Was it like, okay, volleyball signups and instantly your name was on the list, or how did you get involved when you were first starting sport?
So as Mr. Cope said in the beginning, my older sister, who is also on the podcast, she was like queen of ISU Athletics when I was in middle school. She was involved in all three. I think she was captain of all three. And I think for some reason, there was just that mindset in the back of my mind that, oh, I'll probably go into sports. And so when time came that I could sign up, my name was just there. And I remember my very first ACAMIS at Udaloy, I think we were the first game and I stepped out onto the pitch and a coach from Dulwich, she pointed at me and she was talking to her like other coaches and she was like, oh yeah, that's Namoon's sister right there. And that's what I was known as for like my first couple ACAMISs as well. But yeah, I think a lot of it, I was very inspired by my sister.
So was it also difficult to having Namoon being the queen of ISU sports coming up? Must be, right? Or not?
It was, I wouldn't say it was easy, but I don't think because everyone knew that we were sisters, we're still very close anyways. I wouldn't say it was difficult, but it definitely wasn't easy. And I think we excelled in like different things. I think I took more in leadership and she was very sports based and she still is.
Yeah, we're always saying if Anu can be a mix, because Anu is your younger sister in grade 10 right now. If she can be a mix of Misheel and Namoon, she's going to be very, very dangerous. So
that's the thing. I really think she is a mix and I'm really worried.
Yeah. Now, fingers crossed that we can go back and have some travels because she deserves to go out. Everyone deserves that to go out, right? So we had Namoon on the podcast, and she talked a bit about playing some soccer in the US, and then she moved into powerlifting, which I never expected her. The heavy lifting, and we talked about that. How did you evolve? Are you still playing sports, or are you just keeping healthy, keeping fit? What are you doing right now, Misheel?
So I wouldn't say that I have a team or anything. UBC has intramurals where you can just go in for free time and play. So I do join intramurals teams sometimes just to get some volleyball in. Basketball and football, will honestly say not played since I graduated. But besides that, because Canada and British Columbia has such beautiful scenery, something that I would like to get into here is definitely hiking. I did go on like a few back in my first year, and it's beautiful. They take like 4 hours, but then the scenery at the top is just beautiful. And I think that's one of the best ways to keep fit in British Columbia as well. I think last year I was just pretty much going to the gym. I think I joined you guys for a few volleyball practices during COVID. But yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, but these sceneries cannot be better than Mongolia, right? Come on.
Oh, it's a different kind of scenery.
Okay, yeah. So we always talk about, that we're not preparing kids to go to the NBA or playing professional volleyball, but at least if you find that bug inside or that little drive that keeps one saying, I want to be healthy, I want to be involved, or, join intramurals. And that's a great way to connect, right? So that's great to hear. That's great to hear. Continuing, how has the whole pandemic, for you, how was it? Because you went to Canada and then you came back, and now you went back. So how was that for you? How did you cope with being online here in Canada?
I think the pandemic, I don't know if it was the pandemic necessarily, but I think I had more realization of I have to grow up and start adulting. And so I think that's what I did during the pandemic. I took online school. So early in the mornings, I would have classes. And then I was doing an accounting internship back in Mongolia. But the pandemic itself, I think the biggest thing that it made me realize is the importance of mental health. I think so many students and people around the world have struggled with it because of the pandemic and not being able to socialize and do things that we were used to doing for 20 years of our lives.
Did you feel like that was kind of compounded with starting a new chapter in your life, or did you kind of, wrap it all into one? I'm struggling on how to formulate my question, but, did you just accept that, okay, everything's going to be new with COVID, with moving abroad, or did it kind of multiply together to make it, harder for you? How did you approach it?
My first year, I was very into the mindset of, oh, I'm starting a new chapter of my life. But after a semester and COVID hit, I think when I moved back to Mongolia, the whole high school and university just kind of meshed together. I felt like I wasn't actually a university student abroad because I only spent like a very little amount of time actually exploring the city I was in. And so I'm in that mindset still right now of, oh, I have to explore the city and I'm a university student. But yeah, I think because I moved back to Mongolia and was there for such a long time, it really did mesh in together with my high school. And I think that's why I ended up always like going to ISU volleyball practices and stuff, because it's very hometown glory back in Mongolia.
Yeah, it's hometown glory, right? But most alumni, they come back at least for a day, or they show up one day, and that's great. And it's something that we should be very proud of, that they want to come back. How's the situation right now for you, Misheel, being back in Canada? Can you talk about that?
Things here are pretty much back to normal. While I was in Mongolia for the summer, they took off the mask mandate, and then recently, a day after I got out of quarantine, they put it back on because cases were rising. But things are pretty much normal. Everything is open. You can do everything normally. It's just you have to have the masks on and sanitize and social distance.
Sure. This is pretty similar here in Mongolia as well. A lot of things are more or less back to normal as long as you wear a mask. I'm curious, what are your plans for the future? What kind of goals do you have for yourself? Whether it's through university and then after, what do you kind of see on the horizon?
Going to UBC, the people here are very competitive, especially in the Sauer School of Business. And with that, it made me realize that going into my first year, I had no clue what I wanted to do with my life. And you look around you and you think, oh, I'm so behind and everyone seems to have it all together. But you talk to people and you realize that no one really does. And so I think even with that mindset, you still have the feeling of, oh, people are doing better than me. And so I think that's my second year is when I really started to think about what I wanted for my future. And so right now I'm majoring in accounting and hoping to get my CPA, which is Chartered Professional Accountant. And so that's what I'm aiming for in the next 3-4-ish years.
When you say that, people are doing better than me, did you take that as kind of like oh, shucks, look at everyone else got it together, I don't know what I'm doing? Or was it, okay, people are doing better than me, I've got to step up my game and, kind of do better myself? How did you perceive it?
A little bit of both. I think when you realize that, when you think people are doing better than you, you feel lost. And so you don't know where to go from there. And when you don't know where to go, it's just people kind of get into a slump. And I think at one point I really was. And I think that was also when the pandemic collided as well. But then you start to pick it up and you think, all right, rather than doing nothing, I have to start somewhere. And so it doesn't matter where you start as long as you're starting somewhere. And I think for me, it was just research on what I could do and what I wanted to do in the future. And yeah, I think as long as you have some sort of goal, either way in the middle, if you change it, then that's fine. But as long as you're starting somewhere and building towards something, then I feel like you're good to go.
And Misheel, we see that a lot, actually. Mongolia is it's
sure.
a big country, but Mongolia has a small population.
Yeah.
Being at the International School or ASU, you're sometimes in a bubble, and then
for sure, yeah.
we try to break those bubbles by going to a big tournament. I remember exactly what you're talking about now. The first tournament was for some kids a very an eye opener. Like, wow, these kids are really good at stuff. So going to a country like Canada, the competition is the talent pool is much bigger. So I can definitely see that. So how was it first going there? Because you just talked a little bit about it, but did you have that? I think your skill set might help you with that. But some kids struggle with that coming from Mongolia, going to these big countries.
For sure. I also went to Mongolia my whole life. And so I was always so used to the small bubble, everyone knowing each other. So ISU as a whole being a community. And then I transitioned into, it wasn't a smooth transition either. I jumped into this school that has over 50,000 kids, 1,000 kids in my faculty in my year. And I don't know anyone else in my classes as well. And it was very difficult, to be honest. It was, in Mongolia, you know everyone and everyone introduces you to people. But here you sit in a classroom and you just have to have the courage to be like, hi, what's your name? To the people sitting next to you. And that was very difficult. I think what does help is joining a lot of clubs. And if you're like, for people who are interested in athletics, joining intramurals. And that's where you find people that you have common interests with.
Sure, that kind of ties into my next question is, we usually ask for advice for like athletes and stuff, but I'm more curious, what advice would you have for any student, athlete or not, that is graduating from a school in Mongolia and going abroad? Transition could be a little bit smoother.
If you're jumping in from a very small bubble to a big one, there's no matter what, you're going to feel lost. No matter what, you're going to be scared. And it's just a completely new community. But you have to realize that you feel lost. And I think open yourself up to possibilities and meeting new people and all the opportunities that such a big school would provide for you. And so whether that be through clubs, through athletics, through even academics in class, you just have to open up.
Sure, Misheel, for younger athletes now, when we go back to kind of normal, and actually, Misheel, we are going to start with the soccer season first this year, which is kind of a new thing because we have to go outside. We cannot be inside for the first season, and so that's kind of new.
Makes sense.
Fingers crossed we can actually play a little bit later. We're not sure yet. But what would you say to those younger students that might consider playing sports? Why should they just go and just try out?
So I've seen the previous podcasts and a lot of the previous alumni just being like, just go for it. And I know like it's easy to say, just go for it. But for the people who are just going for it, I know that it can be scary. But the outcomes that you learn and the memories that you make, especially in such a small community, are so special and precious, especially to me. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons I would encourage younger kids to join. It's not about the sports. Even if you're bad, you're still going to make endless memories with your teammates, with your coaches, and you're going to learn so many things that a math class will not teach you.
Yeah, definitely. Because I always show a video to new staff at ISU, to the students about the trips. And the last trip we had, Darian, we also had him on the podcast with his sister Kayla a while ago. He made a video, and every time I watch it, I try to hide my tears, but I'm getting a bit emotional about that because it's a lot, man. You go for 5 days with 24 kids to a place, and it's very intense, and you will never forget that. How that will look for the future for these upcoming students, we don't know. But we have to find a way to make memories for them, if it's traveling or if it's more local. But yeah, definitely, like, just try it, right? Even,
for sure.
as we always say. We are pretty lucky to be at a smaller schools, so there's more opportunities to join. Even if you are at a massive school, find opportunities,
Yeah.
Even try.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's one of the advantages of being a coach. You touched on it a little bit, and you, as a coach or as an athletic director, you get the opportunity to interact with students and athletes in a way that your average math teacher doesn't, or your average classroom teacher doesn't. with the trips, with just even bus rides across town, and the goofiness that happens on those. It's just a different sort of bond that you can form.
For sure.
That definitely can get emotional at times, Mr. Coop. So I feel you there.
Very emotional, and especially 5:30 going to ISU to practice, and it's -30 outside. Those things will hunt you down for you for years to come. Yeah, that's great, Misheel. I have one more actually thing I would like to say. What were some of the people that had an influence on you? Some of the coaches. Now you talked about Mr. Dole, and Mr. Dole will get very nervous when I talk about this right now. But what are some of the coaches or people that had an impact on you, and what's some of the biggest memories of those people and the lessons they learned you?
When it comes to coaches, I would definitely say Mr. Dole. He, I think, coached me for the longest and most amount of sports. And Mr. Dole isn't the type of coach to show you love. It's very tough love. It's very
you have to earn it.
Yeah. But when you do earn it, it does feel great. And he knew what he was doing. As a volleyball coach, he was a great player, a great coach. He definitely knew the small tips and tricks. And I think that's one of the main reasons that I fell in love with volleyball, because Mr. Dole he just knew every little part. And so, yeah, definitely Mr. Dole. I think also my older sister, Nams, she, as I said, she played every single sport. And I think she was what initially inspired me to go into sports as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, also everyone else in my journey, it's just all the memories that I've made with all the different coaches, all the different team members that I've had. They're all there somewhere in my head. And if I'm talking about anything with someone else here, just what those small memories from ISU come back, and it's very special.
That's great. Yeah, I remember your last tournament in Macau, the basketball, and then sitting there with the girls, and then Mr. Dole doing his always impressive speeches, and then he started crying, and then you started crying, and I'm like, well, you've had this whole journey together, right? And now it's over. That's something that will stick with you, and
For sure.
just always
Yeah.
find those inspirational people. They're out there, and just try to learn something from everyone.
Yeah.
That's great to hear, Misheel. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Dole's a one-of-a-kind coach. You could tell, like, I've never been coached by him, but I've coached against him. And, you could see that he's rough around the edges, but, at the core, he really cares about his team and his athletes, and that's why he gets so emotional and so passionate about it.
Yeah. So you need those people in your young career, just that inspire you.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's great. Misheel, what is up for you now? How does your weekend look like, or next week? Is it just go back to school, or?
So yeah, it's a Friday here, and I have school starting on Tuesday. So I don't know if I'm nervous or excited, but in-person classes here. And so interesting to see what that's going to look like. I'm also involved in a couple other business clubs here as well. And so, yeah, excited to see what the new year holds.
And Tuesday is the actual start of school, right? Starting.
Yes. Yeah.
First day. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Exciting.
Yeah.
That's cool. Awesome. Yeah, Misheel, I think, CD, we're almost at the end, right? We just don't waste too much of your time because it's Friday evening over there. So you have probably much more important things to do than talking with us.
We got to remember she's a college student. She's probably got to do on a Friday. So
exactly. So Misheel, we really want to thank you. It's always great to talk to former alumni. It's great to catch up with you. I have very fond memories of you and being part of our programs. It's great to talk to you and to talk to alumni, because we are always we're doing something right, and I'm always happy to hear that you had a good time here and that you learned some valuable skills. When do you come back to Mongolia? Next year? Next summer? Is that your plan?
I actually can't. I'm extending my university year by 1 year to do a program called co-op, where I take a year off to work. And so next summer I start work, and I will be working full year. So I won't be back for another 2 years, actually.
Wow. Okay, yeah. So then I hopefully see you in 2 years.
Yeah.
Here, over here. Yeah, just keep in touch, Misheel. It's great to have you
course.
on and that you share your stories with us.
Thank you so much.
No worries.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
please stay in contact, Misheel.
Yes, of course. Have a good day, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
you
you,
too.
Misheel.
Thanks, Misheel.
Bye.
All right, we just sat down with Misheel, former alumni of ISU and sister of previous podcast guest Nams from ISU. And it was a really good interview. She's now in Canada, British Columbia. And it's always great to interview alumni and hear just what they remember about the trips. You know, when she did mention the trips and her time in sports, it wasn't about winning trophies, right? I don't think she mentioned any of the trophies that you guys had won. It was all about going shopping or traveling with her friends or making sure her team had a good time. So that's great to hear.
Yeah, I'm always not that I'm nervous, but more excited to talk to alumni because you had a direct impact on their experiences here. So it's always a bit nerve-wracking. Like, what will they say? Will they open up? Will they be honest? Misheel is always open and honest. I think that's her qualities are that she's very self-aware. Like you said in the podcast too, we were always happy that she was going on trips because she was like our fourth staff member. You could trust her. She had respect for all her coaches, for the AD, for me, and then for the people around her. A great role model for younger students. And I found it very interesting how she transitioned from being a grade 9 student on the trip to being kind of a leader, where she was standing, like saying like, what am I doing here? These kids are so annoying when she was at the end, So she really grew in those years in the sports program.
Yeah, and it was good too to hear her talk a little bit about the challenges of going abroad, because she mentioned, you look around and you see everyone's got it together. I don't think Facebook and Instagram and social media really help that because that's, they just make it look like everyone's got a perfect life. But, I think she's found a way to kind of deal with that and now fit in better at her school. But it is definitely a challenge for our athletes and our students from our schools to where, maybe they are the top dog at a small school and now they're going to go to a giant university where they're just another little fish at that university. So it is something that our students have to manage those expectations when they do go abroad. So that way they're not completely shell shocked from that experience.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's something that we need to, it's great that she mentioned that because I think there should be a focus of our programs, of the activities, of things that we teach them at schools, and some international schools are massive, but some are very small, but they'll have some kind of bubble involved in international schools, just a different community. So going out of that from being, like I said, see the top dog or the queen of ISU, like her sister's name, to you're number 340 in this class or something. That's a transition that's not always easy, going from that privileged kind of lifestyle to being a number. And I think we need to emphasize on that. Those trips are so important for that because they will see that there's more out there. And for us, Mongolia can be very small. We both know that.
Yeah. And I think too, even just dealing with adversity, with you guys have morning practices pretty regularly, losing a match that you thought you were going to win, that sort of stuff, and just how to deal with stuff that's hard. I think is really important
because I remember the first tournaments we had, CD, we said from switching division, which is much harder, but bigger school, bigger programs. And you saw the kids struggling with that the first two tournaments. Like, wow, we were always in the final rounds of the playoffs, and now we are on the bottom, or we're just barely making it, or and that's difficult. But I think looking back at it, it's been very valuable, and it just showed the kids too that they had to work a little bit harder because a few years later we made it to the finals within one tournament. So it's good to have, competition needs to be fair, needs to be not always equal, but it needs to be matched correctly, because you don't want to play and then lose 100-10 in basketball or something. But having good competition around you can only make you better. So, going only to this tournament where you are the top dog, that's not going to help you either.
Mm-hmm.
Not.
Yeah.
So,
Overall, great interview. A lot of good bits from Misheel. As always, great talking to alumni and just kind of getting that reaffirmation that we're doing the right thing, that we're growing our programs in a way that is benefiting these kids.
Yeah, and from every podcast we are learning. And it's also that Misheel said a few things like, hey, we should maybe emphasize on that a little bit. We will see what the future holds for us. Because the future alumni will be a bit different for us, once we had no tournaments for so long. And so we need to find ways to get back. And I know we're trying, and people from all over the world are trying, international schools and ADs, to find opportunities for the kids to build those skills. And we shouldn't stop to try to find them. Definitely.
Well, since you mentioned athletic directors around the world, if you are an athletic director out there that's found our podcast, make sure to like and subscribe. If you've got something interesting or cool or unique that you do at your program, do reach out to us. Contact information is in the descriptions below. And so we'd love to talk and just kind of pick your brain. If you are an alumni that's maybe watching us and checking in, also like and subscribe, and you too can reach out and potentially get on the podcast someday. So we appreciate the support. We appreciate everyone who's watching and or listening. And with that, we'll see you next time.
See you next time.